This is John. Welcome to the NCGA FMC Agricultural Weather Outlook for June 20th, 2015. Well, what a week it's been. Last week's briefing, I said it'd be a rough week over parts of the Corn Belt. Look at this. This area's blue here is saying almost every day, actually every day, 7 out of 7 days there's been some rain. Actually, it's more than this because this ends on the 18th. We have one more day, so it's probably 8 out of 8 days of rain from Oklahoma across Missouri and then the eastern Corn Belt, most of Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and then even further off to the east. So if you're in those areas, you know it's been a gloomy and wet week. Fields are soaked, especially low-lying areas, and rivers are running quite high. Precipitation over the last 7 days, take a look at this. Areas in red are over 5 inches of rain. Areas in yellow are over 2 inches of rain. So virtually the entire states of Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, large parts of Michigan as well, have received anywhere from 2 to over 5 inches of rain over the last 7 days. So eastern Corn Belt definitely got soaked last week, but it was fairly narrow. If you go to the south, look at the southeast U.S., hardly any rain, very hot in that region. Oklahoma, the heaviest rain from the Tropical Storm Bill, Tropical Depression as it moved inland, looks to me like right in this area here was the very heaviest rain. Estimates here are over 15 inches right in this area. So that's probably the most likely the heaviest amount, but still I'm very impressed, not in a good way either, as far as how much widespread heavy rain there was over this area here. So really the best we can hope right now is to get some drying for a number of weeks here and get the crops hopefully pulling some of that moisture out of the ground. But if you're in a low spot, you're pretty much swamped right now with that amount of rainfall. Or if you're in a lowland along a river system, all tributaries, smaller tributaries are in flood, and most main stem rivers as well. Now the percent of normal for the week, you might say, well, was this unusual for this time of year? And this is one of the graphics we can look at for that. This is saying that we had 6 times normal precipitation for the week, that bright purple. So yes, it was unusual for June to get this much rain. This was well above normal. And if we want to say how much extra rain did we pick up for the week, here's a way to look at it. 4 or 5 inches, and even some of that brighter shade of purple is up to 6 to 8 inches of additional rainfall. But generally, most of that's in the 3 to 4 inch range. And that's extra rainfall. That's a surplus of rainfall. Now, if you're up over the upper Midwest, parts of northern Iowa, Minnesota, even though there's been some recent heavy storms overnight in parts of Iowa, but Minnesota, southern Minnesota, parts of central Wisconsin, you might be saying, what's the fuss? Because it's been fairly dry. There's actually a deficit of rain over the last week. But remember quite a while ago now, months ago, I was saying that my outlook for summer was ample rainfall. That pattern has set up, and it looks like it's going to continue, and I'll be talking about that. So I don't think Bill is an example. That's sort of an anomaly, an inland moving tropical system. But definitely with soils this wet, once we warm up, good example, in the Midwest today, we're going to near 90 degrees. All that moisture is available to bring to the lower atmosphere. I'm not going to call it a feedback loop quite yet, but we saw it like way back in 93. Crops actually were doing very well because we had hot temperatures, lots of low-level moisture. So we're going to have to see if we get into that kind of setup later this summer. Now, if you want to look at soil moisture rankings here, we can look at what percentage we're running, and this is a model type outlook, so we can't look at it real close, but gives you some indication of soil moisture near 99th percentile over Texas and Oklahoma, and generally speaking above the 80th percentile over parts of the central and eastern Corn Belt. Indiana, see some areas that soils are near 80 to 90% of the range of where they might be for this time of year. So it's just a way of saying soils are unusually wet in those regions. Now temperatures, a little bit one way or the other, above normal or a little bit below normal. Nothing real extreme last week. Now we do have widespread flooding. The areas with the most significant flooding are areas in red, which is moderate flooding, or purple, which is major flooding. And in those areas, the river's well out of its banks. So we're talking about the Illinois River, most rivers in Indiana, many rivers in Indiana, and the main stem middle Mississippi River as well. Now, if we look at the upper pattern here, here's the jet stream this week. Generally, a sort of a broad pattern with above normal positioning. That's at brown. One of the things when we have this strong flow, it sort of tends to produce thunderstorms that move fairly quickly and cover larger areas. As I get into summertime, that's one of the things that I don't think are mentioned enough is the overall storm movement. And I need to talk about that a bit more in the Ag Weather Advisor throughout the week. If we have a strong jet stream aloft and storms are moving quick, they cover a whole lot more area versus the ones that just pop up and sit still. So at any given time, you can look at a radar picture and you can look at the same coverage, but if they're moving fast. This is a week that they're going to be moving fairly fast over Illinois or Iowa, Illinois, and they're going to cover more areas. So there's going to be a chance of precipitation. Now, the interesting thing is we get into the end of June into early July. I always try to pick out these big trends for you and have you be the very first ones to know about these. Look at this here. We're going to have to watch this if this actually does occur. But right now, out through days 11 to 15, we're getting a more of a amplified jet stream pattern. We're getting more of a building ridge in this area northward and a digging trough in this region here and a little bit of blue. That type of pattern tends to bring some cooler air in. And let's take a look a little bit further ahead if we see that. Here are temperatures this week. Again, some areas above normal, most areas near normal. But look at this, June 30th to July 5th. We're looking at a widespread cool down, actually fairly significant right over the middle part of the Corn Belt, but over almost the entire Corn Belt, cooler temperatures. Let's look at that for our next trend as far as temperatures. Early July, cooling temperatures, a trend towards cooling temperatures. Let's keep an eye on that. We have a ways out there. That's 2 weeks out. I'll keep you updated. So here's your precipitation forecast. I mentioned there was a boundary over the central part of the nation. Thunderstorms moving along that boundary, covering some area up there, and you can see centered right over the Mississippi River, some very heavy rain. At least it's not over the eastern Corn Belt, but still it's over some areas that have been extremely wet, especially northern Illinois. As much as 3 inches of rain over that area. Everywhere else, a fairly quiet week. Now, it's precipitation right now is really the key factor. So let's go through this model output, both in the medium range models and the long range models. Here's week 1. We talked about that pretty good. Week 2, it looks somewhat near normal precipitation, nothing all that heavy. Week 3, more green, no yellow, and week 4. This is that pattern of ample rainfall I've been talking about. We see very little signs of widespread yellow or quiet week. It looks pretty much to me like we're going to have ample rainfall patterns continuing. Doesn't mean it'll rain every day, doesn't mean it'll be excessive, but it does look to me like the likelihood of below normal rainfall is not all that likely. So here are your takeaway points from today's briefing. Pockets of heavy rain over small parts of the central Midwest, primarily along the upper Mississippi River Valley. A pattern of adequate or above normal rainfall until further notice. It looks like right into July right now. And then variable temperatures overall, a little bit above normal, a little bit below, but it does look like there could be a significant trend change of cooler weather heading into July. If you have any questions, there's my email. If you like what you're hearing, if you're a frequent listener, send me an email. I'd like to hear that. I'd like to know I'm on the right track as far as providing you information. Or if there's something I'm not hitting as far as your operations that you'd like me to talk about, send me an email as well, and I'll put that information in the briefing. So hopefully we have a drier week over most areas with some sun coming out. Talk to you again next weekend.